Your future self has already made it. The life you're working toward, the success you're slowly building, the sense of peace you're learning to create, it already exists in your future. From that place, your future self is reaching back to you now. This isn't meant to be dramatic or mystical. It's simply an idea to hold with you, that something good is on its way and you're closer than you think. The effort you're putting in now matters. And somehow, you ended up here at this moment as part of that unfolding, one small step of preparation before what comes next. This isn't wishful thinking. It's rooted in how time and observation interact, an idea explored in quantum physics through a principle often discussed as retrocausality, where future measurements appear to influence past outcomes. While this challenges our everyday understanding of time, it invites us to consider reality as more interconnected than it seems. What you're encountering here can be thought of as a signal, an invitation to pay attention. Over the next hour, you'll be guided to notice patterns and messages that may already feel familiar, helping you recognize what's been quietly unfolding in your life. Your awareness plays an essential role in this process. Like a finely tuned instrument, it responds best when approached with clarity and openness. That is the focus of our work today, gentle attunement. To understand why this idea resonates with so many people, it helps to look at the work of physicist John Wheeler and his well-known delayed choice thought experiment, later explored in laboratory settings. The experiment asks a deceptively simple question. When a single photon travels toward a screen with two slits, does it behave like a particle passing through one slit or like a wave passing through both? What makes the experiment so intriguing is that the choice of how to measure the photon is made after it has already passed the slits. Classical logic would say its path is already fixed, yet the results suggest something subtler. The outcome depends on how it is observed. When measured one way, it appears to have behaved like a particle, measured another way like a wave. Rather than implying that the past is literally rewritten, many scientists interpret this as evidence that reality at the quantum level doesn't fully settle until observation occurs. Time, in this view, is less rigid than we're used to imagining. This perspective offers a meaningful metaphor for life. Your experiences are shaped not only by where you've been, but by how you interpret and engage with what's unfolding now. The intentions, choices, and confidence you bring into the present can reshape how the past integrates into your story and how the future takes form. If you've ever felt drawn toward a future you can't yet clearly see, that pull may be worth listening to. It doesn't mean something is wrong. It can mean you're in a period of transition. That lingering sense of being close to something important, yet not quite there, can be deeply tiring. But it isn't necessarily a sign of failure. Often, it appears when old paths are no longer a fit, even if the new one hasn't fully revealed itself yet. Think about those moments when everything seemed to align. A promising opportunity that dissolved at the last moment, a project that felt inspired but lost momentum, or a series of coincidences that pointed somewhere meaningful before going quiet. These experiences aren't dead ends. They can be seen as moments of refinement, gently steering you away from what no longer serves you and toward what's still forming. Rather than near misses, they may be signals, indications that your direction is adjusting, that clarity is increasing, and that distractions are gradually falling away. What felt like an ending may simply have been space being made. That sense of standing on the edge of something new wasn't imagined. It may be a sign that you're closer than you think, moving steadily, even if quietly, toward what's next. It's like an echo growing clearer as you move closer to its source. To understand this, it helps to shift metaphors, one inspired by the physics we've been exploring. Think of it as a time echo. Imagine a future moment of fulfillment, achieving something deeply meaningful, stepping fully into who you're becoming, or receiving the outcome you've been working toward. Consider that moment as a significant event in space-time, not dramatic in a literal sense, but impactful in how it shapes your life. Like a distant clap of thunder, it sends out waves of influence. In everyday thinking, we expect to see the lightning first, then hear the thunder. Cause, then effect. But at the quantum level, things don't always unfold so neatly. Sometimes the information arrives before the visible event. In this metaphor, the echo of that future moment reaches you before the moment itself fully takes shape. That quiet intuition, the unexplainable sense of knowing, the pull toward a path you can't yet justify, these can be understood as you becoming aware of that echo. Even the feeling of longing for something you can't quite name may be part of it. Not proof, not prediction, just signals that something meaningful is forming. Those coincidences that catch your attention, the moments where things almost align, can feel like disruptions in the ordinary flow of life. Rather than seeing them as failures or false starts, you might view them as early ripples, subtle indications that change is underway. Picture dropping a large stone into a still pond. The impact happens at one point, but the ripples spread outward in every direction. Some reach the shore quickly, long before you see the stone itself. Those moments when you felt close to a breakthrough may have been the first ripples, gentle confirmations that movement had already begun. From here, the work isn't about forcing outcomes or waiting passively. It's about learning how to listen more clearly, to tell the difference between fear-driven noise and the quieter guidance that comes from deeper awareness. With practice, it becomes easier to recognize which signals are worth following and which can be let go. This is less about striving toward a distant future and more about receiving information that's already making its way to you. You're not constructing something from nothing. You're responding to something that's gradually revealing itself. Seen this way, the journey isn't about reaching some far-off destination. It's about noticing that guidance has been present all along, steadily pointing you forward. And while these ideas can sound philosophical, they're inspired by real questions raised in physics, particularly those explored by John Archibald Wheeler and his delayed choice experiment. This experiment, simple in design yet profound in implication, invites us to reconsider how observation, time, and reality interact. Imagine a basic setup. A device sends a single particle of light, a photon, toward a screen with two narrow slits. Beyond the screen sits a detector, waiting to record what happens next. Now we come to the heart of the quantum mystery, one that puzzled even Einstein. How does a single photon pass through two slits? If it's a particle, like a tiny pellet, it should go through one slit or the other. If it's a wave, like a ripple moving across water, it can pass through both at the same time, creating an interference pattern on the screen beyond. For decades, physicists observed a consistent pattern. When a detector is placed at the slits to check which path the photon takes, it behaves like a particle. It appears to choose a single slit. When no such measurement is made, it behaves like a wave, spreading through both. In other words, how we observe the system affects what we see. John Wheeler, one of the most influential theoretical physicists of the 20th century, took this a step further and asked a provocative question. What if the decision to observe is made after the photon has already passed through the slits? Pause and consider that. The photon is emitted, it approaches the slits, it passes through them, and only afterward, fractions of a second later, does the experimenter decide whether to measure which path it took. Intuitively, this choice shouldn't matter. The event seems complete. The photon's path should already be set. Yet when versions of this experiment are performed, the results suggest something unexpected. The outcome still depends on the measurement choice, even though that choice is made later. When the detector is activated, the data is consistent with particle-like behavior. When it isn't, the data reflects wave-like behavior. Rather than meaning the past is literally rewritten, many physicists interpret this as evidence that, at the quantum level, certain properties aren't fully defined until measurement occurs. Time, causality, and information behave in ways that don't map cleanly onto everyday experience. As a metaphor, This offers an intriguing way to think about intuition and timing in our own lives. The future isn't sending instructions backward in a literal sense, but our present awareness can be influenced by patterns that are still unfolding. What feels like a sudden knowing or an inner pull may be your mind integrating information faster than conscious logic can explain. Think back to a moment when you trusted an instinct that didn't make sense at the time but later proved meaningful. Was that guesswork, or was it a deeper sensitivity to patterns you hadn't yet fully seen? From this perspective, what's being described as a quantum inheritance protocol isn't a technique you have to master, but an awareness you can remember. It points to the idea that human perception operates on more than just linear reasoning. We're often taught to rely solely on conscious analysis, which mostly processes past information, while overlooking the body's quieter forms of intelligence. This framework rests on three simple elements. First, there is the broadcast. Imagine the most integrated, grounded version of yourself, the one who has already learned the lessons you're in the middle of now and is living with greater clarity and steadiness. Not as a fantasy, but as a reference point. Holding that image creates coherence and direction. Second, there is the signal. The influence of that future state doesn't arrive as words or predictions. It shows up subtly, as intuition, meaningful coincidences, creative impulses, or a sense of resonance or resistance. These moments don't have to be mystical. They can be understood as your system responding to emerging patterns. And third, there is the receiver. That's you, your awareness, including your body's innate intelligence. It's a sensitive instrument, but one that can be overwhelmed by constant mental noise. When attention softens and listening deepens, the signal becomes easier to recognize. The invitation here isn't to abandon reason, but to balance it, to allow logic and intuition to work together. When they do, the path forward often becomes clearer, not because the future is fixed, but because you're better attuned to what's already trying to take shape. You can think of the mind as a kind of rear-view mirror. It's excellent at organizing what has already happened. The body, though, is more like a radar, sensitive to what's approaching. This perspective helps explain why so many traditional spiritual or self-help methods may have felt exhausting, frustrating, or incomplete for you. Many of them were built on a strictly linear view of reality. They encouraged effort, projection, and force, calling out into the distance, hoping something would answer back. But what if your role was never to shout at all? What if it was to quiet down enough to notice that an echo was already moving toward you? Let's gently look at a few approaches that often fall short, not because they're wrong, but because they're incomplete. First, rigid visualization. You may have been taught to create a highly detailed mental image of exactly what you want, right down to the smallest specifics. The intention behind this is understandable, but from this perspective, it asks the present version of you, limited by what you currently know, to dictate the exact shape of the future. It's like sending instructions forward in time, rather than staying open to what's coming back. In doing so, you may unknowingly narrow the possibilities. You try to construct something small and familiar, while a much more expansive outcome is already taking form. Letting go of control over how things unfold creates space to receive what truly fits. Second, strained affirmations. Standing in front of a mirror repeating phrases that don't yet feel true can create inner tension rather than alignment. When the words say one thing but the nervous system feels another, the result isn't clarity, it's noise. Instead of calm assurance, the system broadcasts stress. If the future state you're tuning into carries a feeling of steadiness and trust, then practices rooted in pressure or fear can make it harder to hear that signal. It's not that affirmations are useless. It's that they work best when they grow out of genuine emotional resonance rather than force. Third, the subtle mismatch of acting as if. You may have tried to behave like the person you want to become, changing your appearance, posture, or habits, while internally feeling disconnected or uncertain. On the surface, Things look different, but inside nothing has tuned in yet. External performance without internal alignment can feel hollow. True alignment isn't about pretending. It's about gently cultivating the inner state, calm, grounded, steady, and letting behavior emerge naturally from there. When the inside and outside match, effort decreases and coherence increases. The difference between these approaches and what's being offered here is integration. Instead of creating inner conflict, this framework emphasizes wholeness. So connecting with your future self isn't about sending clearer messages outward. It's about becoming a better listener, and that leads to a quieter, more relieving shift in perspective. You don't have to manufacture your best future. You don't have to assemble it piece by piece. From this view, it already exists as a potential you're gradually tuning into. Your role isn't to build a bridge through constant effort. It's to notice the guidance that's already being offered and take the next natural step. This changes the tone of the journey. You move from striving to responding, from pressure to participation, from carrying everything alone to being supported by a deeper intelligence, one that's still you, just seen from a wider angle. The weight begins to lift, the struggle softens. We're often told a familiar idea: your thoughts create your reality. There's truth in that, but it's incomplete. It describes only one direction of influence. For a long time, we've imagined ourselves standing in the present, projecting intentions forward into an uncertain future, hoping they land somewhere meaningful. What if creativity doesn't flow in just one direction? What if part of what shapes your present is the clarity, confidence, and groundedness of who you're becoming? Seen this way, the exhaustion many people feel isn't personal failure. It's the result of pushing against the current. The shift isn't about trying harder. It's about recognizing that your present experience may already be informed by the steadiness of a future you're slowly learning to trust. The creative flow doesn't have to feel like pushing uphill. It can feel more like being gently drawn forward. In this view, your future self, the version of you who has found greater ease, fulfillment, and peace, acts less like a distant goal and more like a quiet point of orientation. Rather than being only a wish or a fantasy, this future can be understood as a direction your life is already leaning toward. From that direction, there's a kind of pull, not forceful, not urgent, but steady. It carries a feeling of completion and clarity, and it subtly influences the choices, opportunities, and encounters that appear in the present. Instead of you constantly trying to project intention outward, you can imagine yourself as someone learning to notice what's already being signaled inward. Your awareness becomes the place where guidance arrives, not as instructions, but as timing, intuition, and small openings that invite the next step. When this idea settles in, something important can soften: the anxiety about doing everything right. The pressure to maintain perfect focus, flawless belief, or unwavering certainty. That tension can ease. You don't have to hold everything together on your own. You don't have to solve the entire future at once. From this perspective, the larger pattern is already coherent. What's asked of you is much simpler: to respond to what's in front of you with honesty and care, one step at a time. Seen this way, success doesn't have to feel like something you're struggling to construct from scratch. It can feel more like something you're gradually stepping into, something that's been prepared through experience, learning, and course correction. This reframes the difficult moments of your past as well. The losses, the delays, the endings that felt abrupt or unfair don't have to be seen as failures. From a wider angle, they can be understood as redirections, moments where one path closed so another, more fitting one could open. A job that didn't last, a relationship that ended, an opportunity that disappeared at the last moment. In the moment, these experiences can feel devastating. With distance, many reveal themselves as turning points that quietly protected you from paths that would have taken you away from what truly mattered. In the same gentle way, moments of synchronicity don't have to be mystical or random. They can simply be signs of alignment, small confirmations that you're moving in a direction that fits. A book that catches your eye, a repeated phrase, a chance conversation. These moments don't demand belief, they invite attention. And that sense of longing you may carry, the feeling of being drawn toward a life, a rhythm, or a sense of belonging you haven't fully lived yet, doesn't have to be dismissed as fantasy. It may be your intuition recognizing something familiar ahead of you. Not a guarantee, not a promise, but a quiet resonance. Rather than proof, it's guidance. And sometimes that gentle pull is enough to trust the next step. It's like the quiet echo of a future reality gently resonating within your present experience. When you look at it this way, the entire approach begins to change. Instead of effort, the focus becomes attunement. Instead of willpower, it becomes willingness. For a long time, you may have felt as though you were trying to force life forward, like pushing against a river, using all your strength to make it flow in the direction you thought it should go. That kind of effort is exhausting, and it often feels unnatural. A different way is to stop pushing, to step into the current, and to learn how to steer rather than strain. The river already knows where it's going. In this metaphor, your future self isn't something you have to chase. It's the current itself. Your role is not to fight it, but to gradually release the resistance. The doubt, the fear, the old stories that make you struggle against what's already trying to carry you forward. This shift naturally leads to something deeper, a change in identity. For a long time, you may have held the identity of the conscious creator. On the surface, that sounds empowering, but it can also be heavy. It places all responsibility on you. You're expected to build everything from the ground up, to hold the vision no matter how difficult things become, to power through obstacles by sheer force of will, and to quietly carry the weight when things don't work out. That identity can be heroic, but it can also be exhausting. At its core is the belief that you are separate from what you're trying to reach. Here, you're invited to loosen your grip on that role, not to reject it, but to thank it for what it's taught you, and then let it soften. In its place, you can step into a lighter identity, that of the inheritor. The inheritor doesn't struggle to build the kingdom. They receive the keys when the time comes. Their strength isn't found in effort, but in alignment. They don't force outcomes. They become receptive to what's ready to arrive. Their main work is listening, noticing, and trusting the process they're already part of. From this perspective, the path feels steadier, not because everything is easy, but because it no longer feels like you're doing it alone. And this isn't meant to stay abstract. This way of understanding life leaves traces in everyday experience. Guidance often shows up quietly, sometimes in ways that feel confusing or even discouraging at first. The signals don't usually arrive as dramatic breakthroughs. They can feel strange, subtle, or inconvenient. Occasionally, they even resemble failure. But with a shift in perspective, those moments begin to make more sense. One of the clearest signs is something that might surprise you, a growing dissatisfaction. This can look like a sudden loss of passion for something that once defined you, a career, a long-held goal, or even a relationship. On the surface, it can feel like burnout or discouragement. The mind often reacts with fear, telling you that you're losing momentum or giving up on something important. But this isn't necessarily an ending. Often it's a clearing. This kind of dissatisfaction can be understood as a gentle disengagement from a path that no longer fits. It's not rejection, it's redirection. A way of loosening your attachment to something that has served its purpose, making room for what comes next. Consider the story of Amelia, an architect. For over a decade, her work was a core part of her identity. She achieved what many would call success, landing a role at a respected firm and spending years designing meaningful projects. For a long time, it was fulfilling. Then gradually something shifted. The excitement faded. The work began to feel empty. Meetings felt distant, and the satisfaction she once knew seemed to dissolve. She felt confused and guilty, wondering if she was being ungrateful or imagining her discontent. From the outside, everything looked fine. Inside, she felt disconnected. What she didn't realize at the time was that this wasn't a failure of character or ambition. It was a signal that her direction was changing, quietly, patiently, and with purpose. Sometimes, before something new can arrive, what once felt essential has to gently fall away. But this is everything you've ever wanted, people told her. And on paper, they were right. She had reached the summit of the mountain she had chosen to climb, only to discover that the view didn't move her the way she had expected. This is the heart of what we're calling the great dissatisfaction. It doesn't make logical sense. It isn't a conclusion the mind reaches. It's something the body knows before the intellect can catch up. A quiet truth that settles in without explanation. After months of inner conflict, she made a choice that felt almost unthinkable. She resigned, with no clear plan, no safety net. It felt less like courage and more like free fall. From the outside, it looked like a mistake. From the inside, it felt terrifyingly honest. 2 weeks later, while still suspended in that uncertainty, she received an unexpected email from a university professor she hadn't spoken to in years. He was leading a humanitarian initiative focused on designing self-sustaining community centers in underserved regions. He remembered her graduate thesis on biomimicry and thought she might be a good fit to help lead the design work. What emerged wasn't just another job. It was an opportunity that aligned with values she had never fully been able to express in her corporate role. It required creativity, depth, and meaning, qualities her previous success had quietly crowded out. Had she stayed where she was, she likely would have been too busy, too committed, and too externally successful to even consider it. Seen this way, her dissatisfaction wasn't a failure. It was a preparation, a signal that something more fitting was waiting, and that space needed to be made for it. The second sign that change may be close is what we might call a synchronistic surge, a noticeable increase in meaningful coincidences. It's when patterns seem to repeat themselves in ways that catch your attention. A phrase you were just thinking about appears unexpectedly. You cross paths with people connected to an earlier chapter of your life. Certain numbers, ideas, or themes seem to surface again and again. These moments don't have to be interpreted as mystical events. They can be understood as indicators of alignment, signals that your attention is narrowing in on something relevant. They often show up during periods of uncertainty, especially after a major internal shift. Consider David, a software developer who had invested years and his savings into an app he deeply believed in. As funding fell through and the project neared collapse, discouragement set in. Then something subtle changed. He heard a specific phrase, the architecture of resonance, on a podcast. Later that same day, he noticed the exact phrase on a billboard advertising an art exhibit. It caught his attention, not because it was magical, but because it felt strangely relevant. When he later met with a potential investor, that person used the same phrase to describe what they appreciated most about David's work. That shared language became a bridge. The investor didn't just provide funding, he understood the intention behind the project. The coincidences themselves weren't the outcome. They were markers, signposts helping David stay oriented during a moment of doubt. What mattered wasn't analyzing every detail, but noticing the sense of resonance they created and responding to it. Often, this kind of synchronistic surge arrives when things feel most unclear, and just as often, it's followed by something quieter. The third sign is the most subtle and frequently misunderstood, a period of calm. After the activity, after the signs and momentum, things may seem to go still. Calls slow down, opportunities appear to pause, the sense of movement fades. To the anxious mind, this can feel like abandonment, as if something promising was lost just when it seemed close. But this quiet doesn't necessarily mean something went wrong. Sometimes, it's a moment of integration, a pause that allows what's already been set in motion to settle and take shape. This stillness isn't empty. It's often a space where clarity is forming, just below the surface. This can be understood as a clear signal from the part of you that already sees the larger picture. The work you needed to do is complete. There's nothing more to force, nothing to chase. The invitation now is simply to pause and allow the remaining pieces to settle into place. This quiet doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means something important has finished forming. Like the stillness in a concert hall just before the music begins, this pause carries presence rather than absence. Imagine a potter who has finished shaping a vase. The hands withdraw. The form is complete. Now the vessel must rest in the kiln, undisturbed, so it can strengthen and become permanent. Intervening too soon would weaken it. In the same way, this calm can be seen as a necessary period of integration, a time when doing less actually allows more to solidify. From this perspective, the quiet is not asking you to disengage from life, but to stop interfering with what's already underway, to trust that something is settling at a deeper level. Consider Maria, a healer who experienced this phase after a period of rapid growth. Her practice had expanded quickly, filled with momentum and opportunity. Then, unexpectedly, everything slowed. Appointments were canceled. Workshops didn't fill. Her inbox grew quiet. At first, the silence felt alarming. She wondered if she had lost her connection to her work. Over time, though, she found herself with space she hadn't had in years, space to walk, reflect, and simply be. In that stillness, she noticed something subtle. Her recent success had pulled her outward, away from the grounded presence that had originally drawn people to her. The pause wasn't a setback. It was a recalibration, a chance to realign before stepping into a wider level of visibility. When that period ended, new opportunities arrived, ones that expanded her work far beyond what she had imagined. The quiet had prepared her for them. Seen together, these experiences follow a recognizable rhythm. First comes the dissatisfaction that loosens what no longer fits, then a period of heightened connection and movement, and finally, a calm phase where everything integrates and settles. When you recognize this pattern unfolding in your own life, there's less need to resist it or label it as failure. You can meet it with patience, with trust, with readiness. You've explored the ideas. You may recognize some of these signs in your own experience. Now, the invitation is to move gently beyond analysis and into feeling. Understanding can guide you, but embodiment is what allows insight to land. So if it feels comfortable and safe, you might gently close your eyes. If you need to remain alert, perhaps you're driving or moving, simply soften your gaze and let your attention turn inward while staying present. Take a slow, easy breath in, and as you breathe out, allow the day to loosen its grip. There's nothing you need to solve right now, nothing to figure out. For these next moments, the only intention is to notice and receive. Begin by bringing awareness to where your body meets what's supporting it, the sense of being held, the quiet reliability of gravity. Notice the air on your skin, the texture of your clothing, the temperature around you. No need to interpret, just notice. Now let that awareness gently expand beyond the edges of your body. Sense the space you occupy, the room around you, the openness that holds everything. This space doesn't need to be defined or named. Simply allow yourself to rest within it. A vast, open field of possibility. A quiet, intelligent space where countless potentials exist, not as fixed outcomes but as gentle invitations. You can think of this field as the medium through which insight, intuition, and coherence emerge. A space where timing, readiness, and awareness meet. Allow yourself to sense being held within this openness. Not floating, not striving, just present, available, receptive. Now, rather than trying to imagine a specific future, let go of images altogether. Release any mental pictures or expectations of what should happen. This moment isn't about seeing or planning. It's about feeling and noticing. Somewhere within this broad field of possibility is a version of you who feels more settled, more aligned, more at ease with life. Not perfect, not finished in every way, just grounded, clear, at home in themselves. You don't need to visualize this version of you. Instead, notice what it feels like to tune toward that sense, like adjusting an old radio dial slowly, patiently, listening for clarity rather than forcing reception. There's no rush, no effort required. As you gently scan inward, notice if a particular quality begins to stand out. It might feel like ease, or relief, or quiet confidence. It may feel spacious, steady, or calm, so subtle it doesn't need proof or explanation. Let your attention rest with that feeling. Allow it to become clearer, not by pushing, but by staying curious and present. This isn't something you're creating. It's something you're noticing, a state your body recognizes as familiar or trustworthy. As you stay with it, see if one word naturally comes to mind that captures its essence. It might be peace, steadiness, freedom, or clarity. Whatever word arises, let it be simple. Let it be enough. You don't need to analyze it. Just hold it gently, like a tuning fork helping you stay oriented. Now imagine, not as a dramatic event but as a quiet connection, that this more settled version of you is aware of you in this moment. Not watching, not judging, simply recognizing you. There's no message you need to receive, no information you have to extract, just a sense of being supported by a wider perspective, one that understands your effort, your uncertainty, and your resilience. If anything is offered here, it's reassurance. A reminder that you don't need to push harder, prove anything, or figure it all out right now. You can rest into the feeling of being accompanied by your own capacity for growth, integration, and trust. Stay with that sense for a few more breaths. Let it settle naturally, without expectation. Allow yourself to sense the quality of support that's available to you here. Not pity, not urgency, just a steady, respectful acknowledgement of where you are right now. There's a feeling of encouragement in it, a quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove anything. You might notice a sense of reassurance arising, subtle but steady. Not the kind that demands belief, but the kind that gently reduces fear. A reminder that this moment in your journey is meaningful and that you don't need to rush or correct anything. You're allowed to be exactly where you are. If it feels natural, let that reassurance spread. Into the chest, perhaps, bringing a sense of warmth or openness. Into the mind, where thoughts can soften and slow without disappearing entirely. Into the body, where long-held tension may begin to loosen, shoulders easing, jaw unclenching, breath deepening. There's nothing you need to force here. Just notice what shifts on its own. Rather than thinking of this as something arriving from the outside, you might experience it as something already familiar, an inner steadiness that's been waiting for your attention. A feeling of alignment, of being oriented in a direction that feels true. Let yourself rest with that for a few moments. This feeling doesn't have to be dramatic or permanent to be meaningful. It can simply become a reference point, a sense of what it feels like when you're grounded, supported, and connected to yourself. You can return to it whenever you need to recalibrate. If a word comes to mind that captures this quality, peace, steadiness, trust, openness, hold it lightly, not as a rule but as a reminder. Take one more slow, comfortable breath. As you exhale, allow this sense of ease to settle naturally, without expectation that it must stay exactly the same. When you feel ready, begin to bring your awareness back to the room. Notice the surface beneath you. Small movements, fingers, toes, a gentle stretch can help you reorient. And when it feels right, open your eyes. Take a moment before moving on. Notice the light, the sounds, the quality of your attention. Even a small shift matters. What you touched here isn't something you have to earn or hold onto perfectly. It's a state you can revisit, an inner orientation that supports clearer choices and gentler movement through life. And from here, the question becomes simple and practical. How do you live in a way that stays connected to this sense of alignment? That's where the next tools come in, not as rules, but as supports for bringing this awareness into everyday life. These aren't tasks you need to get right, and they aren't rituals meant to be performed perfectly. Think of them more as gentle instruments of alignment, simple ways to help this sense of ease and clarity become more familiar in your daily life. The first is called the morning attunement, and it can quietly influence the tone of your entire day. Many people wake up and immediately connect to noise, messages, headlines, obligations, other people's urgency. Before their feet touch the floor, their attention is already pulled outward. It's understandable, but it often sets the nervous system to a frequency of effort and reaction before the day has even begun. This practice invites a different start. Before reaching for your phone, you take a brief moment to check in with yourself. It doesn't need to be long, just a few minutes. You sit or lie quietly, close your eyes if that feels comfortable, and take 3 slow breaths. Let those breaths be a signal to your body that there's no emergency, that you're here, and that this moment is safe. You don't need to enter a deep meditative state. You're simply allowing a little stillness. Then gently recall the feeling you touched earlier, the sense of steadiness, openness, or calm alignment. You're not trying to recreate it perfectly. Just let a trace of it return, enough to remind your body what it feels like. From that place, you silently pose a simple, open question. Something like, what quality would best support me today? Or what energy would serve me right now? This isn't about getting instructions or a plan. It's about listening for a tone, not a script. And then you pause. Often the response doesn't arrive as words. It may show up as a single feeling: ease, courage, patience, curiosity. Sometimes it's an image, a color, or a subtle sense in the body. Sometimes it's simply a quiet knowing. Whatever appears doesn't need to be dramatic to be useful. That gentle response is your reference point for the day. You acknowledge it, perhaps with a small sense of gratitude, and then you continue on with your morning. There are a few common misunderstandings that can make this feel harder than it needs to be. One is expecting something elaborate or highly specific. The mind often wants detailed guidance, but this practice works more like tuning into a mood or direction. You're adjusting a dial, not waiting for a speech. Another is trying to force a result. If nothing clear arises, that's not a failure. Sometimes the message really is simplicity, rest, or just staying present. Even stillness is information. A third is judging what comes through. If the word is patience and part of you resists it, or if the feeling is rest when you were hopping for motivation, notice that gently. Often, what arises is exactly what helps the day unfold more smoothly. Over time, this small daily check-in can make you more sensitive to moments of alignment, choices that feel supportive, conversations that matter, pauses that are needed. It's less about control and more about orientation. This brings us to the second tool, the retrocausal decision filter. Throughout the day, you're constantly making choices, both minor and meaningful. The usual approach is to analyze, weigh pros and cons, and try to predict outcomes. That method has its place, but it can also keep you locked in effort and overthinking. This alternative approach invites you to include the body in the decision-making process. When you're faced with a choice, option A or option B, you pause even briefly. You take a breath. Then you bring option A to mind and notice what happens in your body. Not what you think about it, but what you feel. Is there a sense of openness, neutrality, tension, contraction? After a moment, you do the same with option B. You're not looking for perfection or certainty. You're simply noticing which option feels a little more aligned, a little more spacious, or a little less heavy. Your body often registers the emotional and energetic consequences of a choice before your mind can fully explain them. This practice doesn't replace logic, it complements it. Over time, it can help decisions feel less forced and more grounded, guided by a sense of inner coherence rather than pressure. Together, these tools aren't about striving for an ideal state. They're about gently staying connected to yourself, moment by moment, and letting that connection inform how you move through the day. Rather than analyzing it, try something different for a moment. Gently imagine that you have already made the choice. Let yourself step into it as if it's done, and notice how that decision lives in your body. Then ask a simple, kind question, not as a test but as an inquiry. Does this feeling align with the direction I sense I'm growing toward? Does it feel open, steady, or quietly reassuring? Is there a sense of ease or inner rightness, even if it's subtle? Or does it feel tight or restless? Perhaps a knot in the stomach, a heaviness in the chest, or a kind of urgency that feels more like pressure than clarity. There's no need to judge what you notice. Just be honest about the body's response, and then let that option gently fade. Take another slow breath. Allow your system to reset. Now bring the second option into your awareness. Again, imagine that you've chosen it. Let yourself feel into the reality of that path and ask the same gentle question. Does this one feel more like alignment, more like familiarity or steadiness? More like the quality you touched during your earlier attunement? Often, the option that fits best doesn't feel dramatic or exciting. It feels more like coming home. Even if it doesn't line up neatly with logic or expectation, the body sometimes recognizes a direction that the mind can't yet explain. You might reflect for a moment. Is there a decision in my life right now that shifts when I ask? Which choice feels most aligned with the version of myself I'm becoming? One common pitfall with this approach is mistaking intensity for alignment. Fear and ego-driven excitement can feel charged and urgent, while genuine alignment often feels calm, grounded, and quietly clear. It may not be thrilling, but it tends to feel steady and true. Another challenge is letting the rational mind override what the body is sensing. The mind might say, "This is safer," or "This makes more sense on paper," or "This is what's expected." Learning to listen inwardly doesn't mean rejecting logic, but it does mean giving bodily wisdom a real seat at the table. Trusting it is a practice, and like any practice, it grows with use. The third and final tool brings everything into motion. It's called action as amplification. Throughout your day, subtle signals arise, intuitive nudges, creative impulses, quiet inner suggestions. When one appears, you have options. You can question it, postpone it, or dismiss it, or you can respond in a small, grounded way. Taking a simple, timely action in response to an intuitive nudge strengthens your sense of connection and trust. It's a way of saying, "I'm paying attention." The action doesn't need to be big. If you feel inclined to message someone, you can send a brief note. If a book or idea comes to mind, you can look it up. If you feel drawn to take a different route or pause for a moment, you can allow that. The significance isn't in the size of the action, but in the willingness to respond rather than overthink. This isn't about acting impulsively or abandoning discernment. It's about honoring subtle guidance when it feels calm, appropriate, and supportive. Each time you do this, you build trust, both within yourself and within the process you're learning to listen to. You reinforce the idea that your inner signals are worth noticing. Over time, they often become clearer, not because you're forcing them, but because you're responding. A common mistake here is waiting for a full plan before taking any step. Often, clarity unfolds through movement, not before it. Another is dismissing small impulses as meaningless. When you're paying attention, even small moments can carry useful information. You don't need the whole path. You only need the next gentle step. There is always signal and noise, and what you are learning, gently, gradually, is how to recognize the signal and give it your attention. This approach works not because you are forcing outcomes, but because focused attention changes what becomes real. When you take a small, intentional action inspired by intuition, you are participating in the observer effect in a very human way. You are noticing something meaningful, responding to it, and allowing one possibility to become more tangible than the others. Over time, this is how potential begins to take form. So here is the simple framework of daily practice for the quantum inheritor. You begin your day with the morning attunement, setting your internal tone and receiving the energetic key for the day ahead. As you move through your hours, you use the retrocausal decision filter to guide choices, large and small, favoring what feels aligned with the sense of inner home you've already touched. And whenever an intuitive nudge arises, you respond with action as amplification, reinforcing trust and clarity. Attune. Navigate. Amplify. This is not a system of effort, it is a system of flow. Each part strengthens the others. The more you attune, the clearer your inner guidance becomes. The clearer your guidance, the easier your decisions feel. The more you act in alignment, the stronger and quieter the signal becomes the next time you listen. Gradually, you stop chasing the future and begin meeting it where you are. You've already done something meaningful here. You've moved from understanding with the mind to recognizing with the body, from theory to lived experience. You are no longer simply hoping something will arrive. You are learning how to receive guidance in real time. You have felt the resonance. You have anchored the signal. You have begun the practice. This isn't dramatic or mystical in the way stories sometimes make it sound. It's subtle, steady, and deeply practical. It represents a shift in how you relate to time, choice, and your own capacity for growth. You are not the same person who started listening. That version of you was waiting for reassurance. This version knows how to listen inwardly and respond. And perhaps this isn't an ending at all. What if this sense of alignment you've touched is not tied to a single future, but to a wider field of possibility? What if your future self isn't one fixed outcome, but a landscape, many versions of fulfillment, creativity, service, and peace, each carrying its own quiet invitation? You've learned how to tune your awareness to one clear signal. That was necessary. You don't explore a vast library by trying to read every book at once. You begin by learning how to read one page well. Mastering reception opens the door to conscious choice. The idea that multiple futures coexist is explored in physics through what's known as the many worlds interpretation, a theoretical framework developed to better understand how quantum systems behave. Whether you approach it scientifically, metaphorically, or intuitively, the implication is gentle but profound. More is possible than we usually allow ourselves to consider. For now, there is nothing more you need to do. Listening is enough. Responding is enough. And allowing the next step to reveal itself, quietly, naturally, is enough too. It suggests that whenever a quantum event holds more than one possible outcome, reality unfolds into multiple paths, each carrying a different result. Rather than a single future marching forward, countless possibilities may be unfolding side by side. You find yourself living within one of these streams, naturally drawn along by its momentum, sensing where it seems to lead. Learning to receive the echo was about noticing that movement, about easing into alignment with the current you were already in, trusting its direction instead of resisting it. The next step is subtler. It's about lifting your awareness, noticing the wider landscape, and realizing that many currents flow nearby. You may be standing at a meeting point of possibilities, not bound to just one direction, but gently invited to recognize choice. This shift moves you from simply experiencing a path to participating in how you move through it. It still relies on what you've practiced: attunement, trust, and sensitivity to the feeling of a future taking shape, but it introduces a quieter form of agency, not control, but discernment. It's the difference between drifting with the tide and learning how to read the water well enough to steer. That's why our next transmission is called Quantum Timelines Explained: how to choose the future that's calling you. We'll explore the ideas behind the many worlds perspective and offer a practical, reflective way to engage with possibility. Less about forcing outcomes, and more about recognizing which future feels most aligned and alive for you. It's a natural continuation of what you've already begun to open, inviting clarity, curiosity, and conscious participation in what comes next. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video, Quantum Timelines Explained, how to choose the future that's calling you. It's an important next step, not because anything is lacking, but because a new layer of understanding is opening. Receiving what's been offered is one thing. Learning how to move among possibilities is another. After that, we'll continue to go deeper, exploring the intriguing evidence that parallel realities may be closer and more tangible than they first appear. Not to overwhelm the mind, but to help it settle into the same quiet confidence your intuition may already be sensing. The path is becoming clearer. The journey is gently widening. You may have arrived here feeling close to something meaningful, yet still just out of reach, carrying the tiredness that comes from waiting for a breakthrough that never quite arrives. You leave with a different understanding. The horizon was never meant to be reached. It was meant to invite you forward. You are not waiting for permission, timing, or an external sign. You are already participating in what you've been seeking. And today, you've gained a clearer sense of how to move ahead. Your next step is simple. Keep listening, keep noticing, and keep walking forward with care and curiosity. The way is open. The invitation remains. Your future is calling. When you're ready, you can answer.